He was older, richer, and what he did first felt like kindness. Maya remembers the way the light hit his face the first time they sat together, the warm, late afternoon sun pooling over the mahogany table at the gallery opening. He introduced himself with a steady voice and a cardigan that smelled faintly of cedar and travel. He had a way of listening that made the edges of her sentences straighten. He offered a ride home when the city train stuttered, then a recommendation for a small grant that would cover a studio rent she hadn't yet dared to imagine. The favors began as discreet, tidy things. A recommendation here, a ticket there, a guest list cleared for an opening. Her life, which had been threaded together by late invoices, subway maps, and phone screen glow, felt softer around the edges. He offered comfort in practical form, and she accepted it like someone catching a hand on a high ledge. You don't notice it at first because the favors are useful. They plug holes. They smooth over 1,000 small frictions that make independence costly. That is the pattern. Small usefulness becomes habit. Habit becomes reliance. If this story rings a bell, pause and notice one small change in your life today. Stage 1. The sound he added. The first thing he changed was the room. It wasn't dramatic. A voice on a smart speaker. A soft playlist he curated for focus. An air purifier he left behind because your apartment felt dry. He arrived with objects that made her space quieter, softer, more ordered. The old radiator squeak was gone. His gentle jazz replaced the harsher noise of the city. He installed a lamp that took half the shade from the living room and softened everything else into dim edges. He asked where the best light hit in the mornings and moved her easel closer for her. Small moves, considerate gestures. Maya noticed the comfort immediately. She found she could work for longer stretches without the usual cold or the neighbor's late television. She slept deeper with the softened soundscape. His presence started to come with a silence that felt like permission, to be late to meetings, to skip calls, to rest. Then she began to prefer that silence. When he wasn't there, the apartment felt thin in a way that made her reach for her phone more often, checking messages, seeking that curated calm. The silence he brought became the standard. Her own old noises, the timer on her stove, the ring of a friend's laugh, moved toward the edges. Practical anchor. Notice the things that change the atmosphere of your days, the sounds you rely on, the devices or people who fix discomfort. Ask which of those make you feel safer, and which make being alone feel intolerable. Stage 2. The tremors he learned to name. He introduced uncertainty like weather.
Small cancellations, sudden favors withheld, a vague story of a business emergency. Each one made her chest tighten for a moment, and then unclench when he reappeared offering a solution. He would be late to a dinner she expected him at, and then call with concern. "Are you okay? Do you want me to come now?" He learned the tone that made her relax, then dialed that tone just enough to make her crave his arrival. There were nights when she woke with her jaw clenched, a small pulsing inside her temples, the kind of waking that comes after a dream of falling. She told herself the beatings of panic were hers alone. Deadlines, the freelance life, the city. He heard about those nights as if they were small technical problems, and the next morning the problem would be solved. An appointment with a therapist he knew, a prescription sent via a sympathetic pharmacist, a meditation app paid for and activated on her phone. The pattern taught her to measure safety by his proximity. He had engineered small shocks and then held out the hand that steadied her. Each shock was never too large to recover from. That was the point. It left her feeling grateful and dependent rather than violated. Practical anchor. When someone repeatedly becomes the solution to the uncertainty they helped create, treat that as a red flag. Keep a small list, dates, the event, how it was resolved, so you can see whether the pattern is deliberate. Stage 3. The relief that binds. Relief became a method. He learned the architecture of her day and filled it in with conveniences that were hard to refuse. A driver to pick her up when a deadline loomed, an assistant organizing her calendar, a surprise transfer to cover a stubborn bill. He made little rituals, his coffee waiting for her in the kitchen when she woke, his text in the morning reminding her to breathe. When work swamped her, he offered to speak to a client on her behalf. When she complained about loneliness, he booked a weekend away for the two of them, where the town had no cell reception. Each act read as generosity, until the ledger of her life looked different. He paid the rent half the time. He answered professional calls with an authority that gradually silenced her voice on the line.
He scheduled her social life to make sure she would be with him during evenings when networking mattered to his circle. The relief felt like rescue, and rescue, when it's frequent, teaches someone to stop practicing their own rescues. She noticed the subtle depletion, the energy it took to say yes constantly, the sense of fatigue that arrived late in the week, the moments when she could not remember whether an appointment belonged to her or to the plan they had made together. His relief smoothed over anxiety, but also sanded away the rough edges of her independence. Practical anchor. Track the favors that reduce your responsibilities, and ask who gains when you stop performing those tasks.
Reclaim one small responsibility this week. Your bills, your inbox, a meeting. Each small habit you maintain rebuilds muscle. Stage 4. The new story she told herself. The quietest, most dangerous move was the one inside her head. At first, it was a line he said casually. "Are you sure? That seems risky." He would point out a missed detail in a contract or a forgettable social slip and then offer to fix it. Over time, his questions settled into a rhythm that reframed her thinking. When she celebrated a piece sold, he would note how lucky she had been and then ask whether she had thought about risk management. When she hesitated, he offered a calmer, more experienced voice, the one he used when describing his years in business. Maya began to notice the shape of her sentences changing. She prefaced ideas with apologies. She rehearsed decisions in his voice before making them aloud. In a sketchbook that was once full of bold lines in unapologetic color, her notes turned corrective, small panic boxes in the margins like caveats. She started to forget that she had ever felt decisive without his approval. The worst bit was that she couldn't feel wholly sure where her own memory began and a suggestion of his ended. If he said he told her about a meeting, she sometimes believed him even when she had no recollection. When friends told different versions of events, she found herself choosing the version he favored because it felt safer to align with him than to risk being wrong. Practical anchor. Keep a separate, dated log of decisions, big and small, so you can see your choices written by you. When the voice of doubt repeats someone else's phrases, name it to yourself. This sounds like Jonathan's voice. Naming slows the internal rewrite. Stage 5. The rituals that kept the door closed. Finally, the rhythm of her days itself bent toward him. He created rituals that made being apart inconvenient. A shared playlist that only played in paired devices, calendar entries that bled into each other with his initials, communal dinners where his friends sat in the places he chose. He suggested they set regular nights together so work wouldn't crowd out life, and those nights staffed until friends said their invites were always too far in advance. He asked that her phone be muted when they were together because moments should be uninterrupted. He suggested friends drop by rather than plan, which always let him frame the timing. Small social gestures became fences. Her inbox showed fewer invitations. She found herself refusing or postponing trips because they never worked out with his schedule. Friends mentioned canceled plans with a tone of apology when she reached out. She felt guilty for the friction that distance created. Energy for independent projects drained into the practical labor of maintaining the life he'd made easier for her. Practical anchor. Map your week for a month and note which activities center other people's needs and which are yours. Reintroduce one ritual you used to love, coffee on Saturday, evening drawing time, a class, and guard that slot with a firm but simple boundary. One small thing snapped the illusion. The moment landed like the clack of a door closing, a calendar notification in the quiet of her studio announcing an RSVP to a charity dinner with his name at the top, scheduled at the exact time of a residency interview she'd been preparing for months. She was 5 minutes from the interview when the notification arrived, an automated blur that felt suddenly like a serrated edge. She called his assistant because he was on a call. The assistant answered in that smooth, rehearsed voice and then, without meaning any harm, explained that he had already moved her commitments because he thought it best. He has your best interests at heart. She called his number. It went to voicemail. She called the residency coordinator and heard with the damp, formal kindness of official people that the slot had been shifted and a replacement had already been named. Maya felt the air leave her lungs, not like a wind knocked out, but like a vacuum. For a second, she could hear nothing except the faint hum of the purifier he had given her. That same sound that had been comforting and now felt like a machine running to keep something from collapsing. She stood in her studio with a sketchbook in one hand and the phone in the other, the light outside moving precisely as if it had always been doing this, indifferent. Then a friend, Ari, called. Ari had driven across town with a poster folded under his arm to surprise her at the interview. He listened to her tell the story and, quiet for once, said, "Maya, you missed more than an appointment. He scheduled you." The words landed like a clean blade. They were not accusatory, only factual. In that instant, a film lifted. The quiet that had felt like comfort now revealed itself as a system.
He was not simply helpful, he had arranged her life to his calendar. He had routed her choices through his preferences. He was older, richer, and slowly took control, and the slowness was the secret weapon. It kept the changes from feeling like violations until the ledger itself had been altered. Clutching the phone, the smell of cedar and coffee, the hum of the purifier, the small beefy weight of the tractable cardigan in her memory. She felt outrage and grief untangle into a thin, clear decision. She needed to reclaim small, undeniable parts of her life. Reclaiming, the work of small habits. Recovery did not arrive in a single dramatic confrontation. It came as a list of ordinary actions, each one chosen because it could not be taken away in a single day. She began with steps he could not immediately control. First, she called Ari and asked him to come over.
He arrived with a thermos and a patience that felt like a bandage for the rawness she couldn't yet name. He sat with her while she opened her bank app and they looked at the incoming transfers together. He taught her how to flag recurring payments and how to change a password. They did not speak in sermons. They did small, practical things. Resetting two-factor authentication, calling a number to ask about joint access. Where she felt embarrassment, he gave blunt normalcy. This is fixable. We'll do it together. She put 2 morning rituals back into place that she hadn't realized she'd lost. The first was a walk before coffee, her city, raw and at its sharpest, where no one knew the soft contours of her difficulties. The second was a 30-minute studio block in the afternoon with no devices. She protected those slots like a tenant protecting the last light in an attic apartment. She found a therapist, a person with a transcript and a door with a plaque, and did not expect the therapist to fix her. The therapist offered questions she had never thought to ask herself aloud, and suggested a support group where others spoke in the hard, practical language of boundary setting. She sat in a circle and heard how common the architecture of slow control was, and that hearing other people's steps back towards themselves was quietly powerful. She also sought out trusted professionals, an accountant for her freelance books, a lawyer for a conversation about power of attorney and financial arrangements, with the explicit understanding that professional advice is exactly that, advice from someone who knows the terrain. When legal or medical directions were necessary, she asked for referrals and second opinions. The tasks were small and steady. She changed passwords, unsubscribed devices he had added to her home network, unpaired the shared playlist, created a new email for professional correspondence, and put a friend's number as her emergency contact at accounts. She started saying no to invitations that were meant to be just the two of them, and watched which of those no's came with unreasonable pressure and which left the air clear. When he suggested safety reasons to keep her from traveling alone, she proposed alternatives that cost nothing. Check-ins, a simple plan to confirm arrival. When he responded with annoyance, she noted it without attribution of villainy. She named the behavior and chose for herself. There were setbacks. He called with apologies and flowers and talk of hurt feelings. Friends advised caution about burning bridges. She listened to those cautions and still maintained small, firm habits. Her morning walk, her 50-minute studio block, a weekly call with Ari. She gave herself time to grieve what had felt, at moments, like genuine care. She did not erase that. She kept it present so she could see both sides clearly. The work of rebuilding agency felt like muscle memory.
Each time she insisted on paying her own bill, she was practicing autonomy. Each time she kept a commitment that belonged exclusively to her, she was re-establishing a boundary. Each conversation with a professional, each meeting with friends, built a scaffolding outside of him, community, routine, and expert counsel. The last act that felt like a turning point was unspectacular. She took a train to a residency interview on a rainy Monday, ticket in hand, a small bag with socks, and the knowledge that no one could cancel the train for her. She boarded alone. When the carriage pulled away from the station, she looked out at the platform, at the place where she had once accepted a ride, a favor, a rearrangement, and felt a long, quiet steadiness. It did not mean everything was fixed. It meant she had begun to refuse the slow erosion. What to watch for and what to do. There are 5 reminders here, because patterns like this tend to form in stages. The reminders are not rules meant to induce paranoia. They are lenses to help you see small changes before they become architecture. 1. The environment clue. Notice who reshapes the spaces you live and work in, and whether those changes make you feel unable to be alone. Reclaim one physical corner that is just yours. No shared devices, no curated playlists. 2. The uncertainty clue. Track moments of withholding followed by rescue. Keep a dated list of incidents so you can spot the construction of a pattern rather than one-off generosity. 3.
The helpfulness clue. Treat persistent solutions with curiosity. Who benefits if you stop doing a thing? Relearn one task you've ceded. 4. The inner voice clue. Keep a written log of decisions and name the phrases that feel like someone else's voice in your head. Naming detaches their control. 5. The ritual clue. Map your social time. Which rituals center another person's schedule? Restore one ritual that was yours alone and defend it. If you recognize this pattern in your life, there are practical domestic steps you can take immediately. There are professionals whose expertise can help you sort finances, legal arrangements, and emotional safety. If you feel in danger or unsure, lean on trusted people and seek a qualified professional. Community and counsel matter. The path back is not dramatic so much as cumulative. Small, consistent acts rebuild independence the way erosion builds control, slowly, inevitably. He was older, richer, and slowly took control. But the opposite is true too. Recovery is often quieter than the takeover. It is the mild, repeated work of turning lights back on in rooms that had been dimmed. It is walks taken before the city wakes, a journal with dates, a friend's voice that refuses to normalize harm, a therapist who offers clear questions, and the stubborn habit of doing one small thing for yourself each day.
In the end, the ledger reads differently, not because the favors never happened, but because she learned to measure them against a life she chose to keep. The cardigan and the cedar and the smooth voice are parts of a chapter she survived, not the whole book. He was older, richer, and slowly took control, but she is learning how to take the minutes, the rooms, the small rituals back, one steady action at a time. If this resonated with you, consider reaching out to someone you trust, a counselor or a support group, and naming one small step you can take this week to reclaim. Small, ordinary actions add up. You do not have to rebuild everything at once.